Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. This month, I am doing a series called Energy and Ease for the Holidays. I'm going to keep these episodes fairly short. I know at this time of year you are super busy, but I think it's a really important time of the year to recognize where our energy is so that we can manage it properly, so we can enjoy our holidays. So I'm so glad that you are here. This is the first in the series, and today we're exploring one of my favorite yoga teachings called Sthira and Sukha. And you may have heard your yoga instructor or guide in a class talk about finding the balance in a pose between effort and ease. And this is what they're talking about. They're talking about this Sthriya and Sukha, the effort of the pose and also putting in that effort. So you're using your muscles, you're feeling steady, grounded, rooted, strong, but you are also feeling easeful, right? You're relaxed in the body in places where it is appropriate to be relaxed and not holding tension. You're feeling calm, internally calm. The mind is slowed, the breath is deep. This is that balance. And as in everything that we do on the mat, the reason we practice it on the mat is so that we can take it into our lives off of the mat. Really, that is the intention of an asana practice. It is to take all of these teachings and put them into practice on that little rectangle, in that environment of a yoga class where things are calm and peaceful, and hopefully you're in a compassionate, loving studio space or home space. And it gives you an environment to practice these philosophies in so that we can really create those neural pathways and then bring them out into the world that is often more chaotic, louder, a little more challenging, maybe feeling less compassionate, less loving, right? We can reach for the things that we've already started to learn in that safer environment. So if your December feels a little loud, a little rushed, or a little pressurized to be perfect, this episode is going to feel like a giant full body exhale. But before we get into it, I want to remind you that I am a Dharma coach and I help midlife women get unstuck and start living the life that they are dreaming of. And that means regulating your nervous system so you can finally actually get to know yourself on the deepest level and understand who you are and what you actually want, and then discover what it is that's holding you back from actually living the thing you want, as well as tapping into your intuition so you can hear the messages that are being sent to you by your higher self, by God, the universe, by your guides, whatever it is that's on that other side that you believe in that sends you those intuitive messages. We have to learn how to tap in and hear them. And then we work towards finding your true purpose, why you were sent here in this lifetime, with the experiences that you've had, the knowledge that you've obtained, the hard things that you've gone through. All of that adds up to a way of expressing your essence or the truest part of yourself, which is your purpose or your dharma. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, please book a clarity call. The link is in the show notes. And you can also find it on my website at katiefreeness.com. Okay, so let's start with where you may currently be. It's the beginning of December. Thanksgiving has just passed if you're in the United States, and it is the beginning of the holiday season. So you may already be buying presents. You may be making plans to travel for the holiday. You may be thinking about hosting and what needs to happen if you are the host. You may be juggling work along with all of your normal expectations for parenting, and other family obligations. You may be accepting invitations to social gatherings. And along with all of this, you are feeling lots of different emotions. Maybe this is the first holiday with a loved one that's passed, or maybe you have a loved one that is not doing well this holiday. Maybe you're the parent of a teenager who's really going through a tough time or putting you through a really hard time. And maybe you have certain expectations about what you want this holiday to be or what you think others want this holiday to be. Maybe you're trying to create magic for everyone else while feeling totally overwhelmed on the inside. And this is the holiday version of too much effort. And it's exactly where the yoga teachings of Sthira and Sukha become incredibly helpful. If you've ever been in a yoga class, you may have heard your yoga teacher say, find effort and ease in the posture. And that comes from the Yoga Sutras written by Patanjali, where Patanjali says asana should be practiced with both steadiness and ease. So, as a reminder, asana are the physical postures. And at the time, actually, that was just a seated meditation. There were no other physical postures at the time where he wrote that sutra, but what he meant was there was a steadiness in your seat, but also an ease, right? You could hold it for extended periods of time because the amount of energy that was required to sit there was minimal, and yet you felt rooted and grounded and steady. It's about good alignment, smooth breath, and soft edges. That's the physical interpretation of this concept, this Sthriya versus Sukha. So Sthriya roughly translates into structure, support, boundaries, and strength. And Sukha roughly translates into softness, ease, space, and breath. And they're actually energetic principles for life because whatever we do on the mat is really just practice for what we do off of the mat in our everyday lives, right? We practice it in that safe, loving, and compassionate environment. And quiet environment. And then we try to take that out into the world where things are noisier, often more challenging, often not nearly as compassionate, right? We practice in that beautiful space. We create that neural pathway so that we can start practicing it in our lives. And these concepts together, this Sthriya versus Sukha, or not, I shouldn't say versus, Sthriya and Sukha, what they are when we add them together is the regulated middle of the nervous system. We are not in fight or flight, but we're also not in collapse or shutdown. And if you listen to my episode on overwhelm, it's a similar concept. If we go too far in one direction, this is what happens to our nervous system. And if we go too far in the other direction, this is what happens to our nervous system. So if we go too far towards effort, towards Sthriya, then we end up in fight or flight. And that's where we may experience a lot of anxiety, overwhelm, a sense of burnout, our vision, we get tunnel vision about things. We are more likely to have arguments. We're less likely to be loving and compassionate. We're less likely to be able to see somebody else's perspective, that type of thing. If we go too far in the direction of Sukha, now we're kind of in shutdown mode and we are in collapse, right? So maybe we kind of throw our hands up in the air and say we basically don't care about anything. We can become depressed, right? So too far into Sukha leads to depression. So it's always about this balance between effort and ease, between doing and being. It always comes back really to the same concepts. Just enough effort and just enough ease. And typically, in the American culture, I can say that we are much more guilty of putting in too much effort than putting in too much ease. Usually the balancing that needs to occur around that efforting piece. Most Americans are not complaining that they are living their lives in too much ease, and have very much so over the holidays, right? Our efforting, we double down on our efforting because we're trying to do all the things that we do in our everyday lives throughout the rest of the year. And now we're also adding on top of that all of the responsibilities and things that need to get done around the holiday. So we fall into this over efforting trap and we shift into this Sritha overload, too much effort, too much doing, too much tension. our nervous system starts to live in that mild fight or flight response. You might notice that you're running through to-do lists in your mind constantly. These are some symptoms that you might notice of this over-efforting, this mild nervous system, fight or flight response. You might notice that you're saying yes to things that really you want to say no to. And your body's responding to that. Maybe you're getting a headache. Maybe you are getting a stomach ache, really at the thought of going to that party that you said yes to and you really didn't want to say yes to, or that thing that you rose your hand to host that you really didn't want to host. You might be feeling responsible for everyone else's emotional experience. So this could look like, maybe families are complicated and not all family members get along and agree at all times. And maybe you're feeling like you have to be the peacekeeper, right? At these family events, you have to prevent the arguments and try to talk to people to get them to see a different side or lighten the mood in some way or distract, right? You're the one who's going to just keep the peace of this experience. Or maybe it's about your children and you're wanting to create this beautiful, magical Christmas for them. And so you're trying to anticipate everything that your child or children could want or desire during this holiday season and making it come true. There's lots of different ways that we somehow decide that we're responsible for someone else's experience of the holiday or of life in general. And that somehow by us doing more or doing certain things, we can create the perfect experience for them or we can prevent a bad experience. None of which are true, but our anxieties like to tell us that. And here's the really important part. Over efforting is a nervous system state. It is not a personal failure. So I don't want you to recognize yourself in a lot of the things that I'm saying and start shaming or blaming yourself. These are coping mechanisms that a lot of us have developed over years of our lives. We may be enculturated to them. They may be based on experiences we've had in the past. They may be part of our family makeup. There are a lot of reasons that we tend to over effort, and particularly during the holidays. But when we do that, when we're unbalanced and we're too much in that shrita, we're too much in that effort, that's when our system becomes overly activated and everything feels urgent. Everything feels like it depends on you and only you. No one else can do it. No one else can possibly do it or do it correctly. Everything feels like it needs to happen right now, right? We tend to have a tremendous sense of impatience. It needs to happen and happen right now because I have 100 things on my to-do list after this thing that needs to happen, right? So this thing needs to happen right now so I can get to all of those other things. The body isn't meant to live in this state for very long, right? There are moments or in our lives where we really need this over efforting. But when we start living in that over efforting for an extended period of time, and I also want you to think about this, are you over efforting in your everyday life? And now the holidays arrive and you are doubling your over efforting, right? So just taking a moment for reflection, am I over efforting every day? Am I trying to manage people's feelings? Am I trying to take on more than what my system can handle? And what is even needed by me? Am I feeling like everything has to happen immediately because my to-do list is so long? Am I saying yes to things that I really want to say no to, right? I'm talking about in our everyday lives. Um, and if the answer to that is yes, now you're already running on this overactivated nervous system. And now we're adding the holidays on top of that. And when we live in this over efforting, when our sthritha is out of balance, we start to contract, we start to brace, we start to harden, and we start to lose the ability to connect with ourselves and to authentically connect with others because we really can only see, our field of vision has narrowed so much that we really can only see what needs to get done and who is either helping us get those things done or is in the way of getting those things done. But our priority is to get it done rather than to be present, to connect, to be able to see things through someone else's perspective and sense their internal state, to understand that we are all connected, that we're all one, right? We start to lose the fundamental essence of who we are because we're stuck in this fight or flight. So let's just do a 1 minute somatic check-in here. If you're able to pause for a moment, let's just check in with your shoulders. Are you able to drop them down just a little bit? Are you able to let them fall away from your ears a little bit? And now let's check in with your jaw. How does your jaw feel? Is it clenched? Are you grinding your teeth? Are you holding tension in your jaw? And can you just relax it? Can you let the bottom teeth fall away from the top teeth? Maybe moving the jaw around a little bit in circles in each direction. Maybe just letting it hang open without any movement at all. And now let's check in with our eyes. What about the little muscles surrounding the eyes? Can you relax those muscles a little bit? Can you soften the space behind your eyes? And how about your forehead? Is there any furrowing or pinching of the forehead? I'm very guilty of this one personally. Can you relax the muscles of the forehead? And now ask yourself silently, am I bracing or am I softening? And just notice the answer that comes. There's no judgment. There's no even expectation to change anything in this moment. There's just awareness. And now let's take a slow inhale through the nose and a very long exhale, also through the nose. And now just notice your state. Do you feel a little softer? Does your breath feel a little more easeful? Do you feel a little more space or presence? Okay. These are all signs that your nervous system is down regulating, out of that fight or flight, out of that over efforting or too much Sthritha. And you are down regulating, allowing Sukha to come in, right? Allowing that ease to come in, allowing that sense of space, allowing that softness, allowing that rest, right? Sukha is also about rest. Okay. Hopefully that little micro practice allowed you to feel a little bit of that. So here are a few other tiny check-ins that you can do throughout your day. That we can weave these into busy days. They take seconds and they really make a huge difference. So number one is the just enough check-in. So asking yourself, what is enough right now? Not what's perfect, not what others expect of you, not the idealized version of what you would like something to be, but what is just enough. And let that be your guiding principle. I like to ask myself, What would happen if I didn't fill in the blank? What would happen if I didn't make dinner tonight? What would happen if I said no to that social obligation? What would happen if I just bought the baked good instead of actually baking the baked good, right? What would happen if I decided to give out fewer gifts this year and just write people some beautiful cards, right? What would happen? And our brains could go to the very negative side, right? Depending on where we're living, right? We could say, well, if I don't make dinner tonight, then no one will have anything to eat and everyone will just eat junk, right? The family will eat junk. Okay, what's the worst thing could happen if that happened, right? What's the worst thing that could happen, right? If I say no to that family obligation or to that social engagement that I was invited to, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, my friend could be offended and stop talking to me. Maybe that's the response that your brain gives you. And then you have to ask yourself, well, how likely is that to happen? Likely or unlikely? Well, if it's a good friend, very unlikely, right? Very unlikely. And if it does happen, how good of a friend was that friend? And is that someone who's worthy of calling a friend, right? So starting to ask yourself, what is enough? And if the answer to what is enough scares you, what's the worst thing that could happen? Okay. And then being realistic about how likely it is that it would happen and what's the worst thing that could happen if that happened, right? The next exercise is soft belly breathing. So you can take a hand on your belly and inhale gently, and then exhale, and you'll feel your belly soften. And that's the entire exercise. Just feeling your belly expand and then feeling your belly soften as you exhale. So as you inhale, it's like blowing up the balloon. The belly gets rounder, a little more tension there. And as you exhale, it's like letting the air out of the balloon. Everything softens. And that's it. You can do it when you're standing in line at the grocery store or Target or wherever you shop. You can do it before you walk into a family gathering that you know could be a little challenging. You could do it when you're sitting in traffic and you're really feeling dysregulated because you are stuck in traffic and you have a lot of things you need to do. Anywhere, anytime, it just takes moments. Then there's number three, the permission slip. Give yourself one every day. Okay. Every day, give yourself a permission slip. I don't have to host this year. I don't have to make everyone happy. I don't need to earn rest, right? Rest is just part of being human. I can make this holiday simple. And this is a great one to journal in the morning when you wake up. If your mind's already racing, you open your eyes. It seems like you open your eyes and immediately the list for the today is running in your head. Which one of those things can you give yourself a permission slip for to opt out of? Okay. And number four is the 30% rule. If you're exhausted, you don't have to give 100% effort. Okay. Because 100% on Monday might be very different than what 100% is on Tuesday. But we tend to think that we should be able to give the same amount of effort every single day. But the fact is that the human body and mind just doesn't work like that. Some days we have more to give and some days we don't. But we judge our days that where we have less energy and space and patience, we judge those against the days where we have more energy and more space and more patience. And we need to stop doing that. We need to understand that our best looks different every day. And maybe today your best is 30% of what it would be on your perfect day, on your day where you slept perfectly, there was no pain in your body, no one was giving you a hard time, your to-do list was short, you had a massage, you took a nap, right? Maybe your best is only 30% of that, and that's okay, right? The more we can have self-compassion for ourselves and know that we're doing the best that we can for today, and that's enough. That takes us all the way back to number one, right? That's enough. Okay, so those are the four mini exercises that I want to invite you to bring into your week. What is enough? The soft belly breathing, giving yourself a permission slip to opt out of things, to rest, to make your holiday simple, and the awareness that sometimes the amount of effort that we can give is much less on certain days than on other days, and that that's okay. Okay, so let's place a hand on our chest and a hand on our belly. We're going to inhale for a count of 4 through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to exhale for a count of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just return to your normal breath and then silently ask yourself, where can I soften today? Listen for whatever answer your body gives you. And whatever answer comes, allow that to be enough as well. If you enjoy journaling, which I highly recommend, I think journaling is a beautiful way to process what's going on inside of us, I will offer you this journal prompt. What would enough effort look like this holiday season? And you can also journal on what would more ease look like? What would it look like for this holiday to be easeful? So, as we wrap this episode up, just a reminder, Sthira and Sukha, right? Ease and effort. It reminds us that we don't have to choose between being strong and being soft. We get to have both, and they get to be in balance. We get to be supported and we get to be relaxed. We get to care for others and we get to care for ourselves. So as you move through the rest of the season, remember you're allowed to choose ease. You're allowed to soften. You're allowed to do less. You're allowed to make this holiday enjoyable for yourself. You're allowed to create the experience that you desire. And doing so doesn't make you selfish, and it doesn't make you a bad mother, daughter, sister, friend. It makes you a balanced human, an energetically balanced human, which is good for you and it's good for all who surround you. I thank you for being with me here today. And I'd love to close by just taking one more slow, deep breath in through the nose and a nice long sigh out the mouth. And know that I am with you. I see all the effort that you put in, and I believe you deserve more ease. Have a beautiful week, my friends. Always contact me in any way if you want to talk about this episode, anything related to this episode. You can email me at katie@katiefarinas.com or find me on Substack at Katie Farinas or Instagram, also Katie Farinas. Have a wonderful week. Namaste.